Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works. We've got great conversations going on today. As a matter of fact, in between takes, we had such a good conversation, we almost didn't want to come back here and talk to you, but here we are. Why are we having this conversation? Well, there's agreement by a lot of people that for one reason or another, depending on who you are, you can come up with a bunch of reasons that things are not working. And so what we're putting our attention to is, what is the technology of empowerment? How do we get people to be unstuck with whatever it is that's robbing them of joy and self-expression and really having the life they love? So that's what we're talking about. You want to be part of that conversation? Thanks for being here. So we're going to identify our panel here. And again, I'm Bill Carell. I convened this conversation, but I'm happy to lose control over it every once in a while if all the time, I'm willing for it to go wherever it goes. And that said, I'd like to invite Ken to tell you a little bit about himself. And the question that we're talking about today, Ken, is we spent some time talking about the power of language. Now what we want to talk about is, how do we access the power of language to empower people rapidly? How do we take what is a slow cook accidental process for some people where they finally get it and now all of a sudden they can be producers in their own life? How can we take them through the steps to allow them to do that? And if you don't have a succinct answer, don't worry about it. We're going to get through it, but I'd like to use the leverage of language and empowerment in this half hour. Does that work for you guys?
Cool.
All right. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Ken, tell them who you are.
I am Ken Caputo, founder of Quester's Way, and Bill got me all riled up today. So, and I think like we teach a little simple communication kind of circle, and there's the language, the message that you deliver, which we're all really good at. Look at any social media platform, and everybody's going outwards with their message, defending their language, trying to take remove other people's language, debating kind of almost this black and white thing. And the more important step that we teach people is to recognize when the message that you're trying to deliver has been heard, and then agree that you're both understanding the same thing. Because a lot of times it's not so much the words, it's the way they're being heard, if they're being heard, and then are you hearing the same thing? Is there agreement? And now you can continue to evolve that message. So I wonder if we're talking about attention a little bit. The attention should be less on what's being said and a little bit more on how it's being received and understood. Because if it's not understood, there was no communication. It just didn't happen no matter what words you're using. So terrific. I'll start with that.
Good start. Lisa?
I'm Lisa Sheehan, media person all around. Conscious living is what I strive for in life and in work. I, as far as paying attention, because I was just reading a book and somebody questioned the phrase paying attention. Who are we paying? Why are we paying?
That's excellent.
That is good. It is a weird phrase when you think about it. Talk about language. So just to pay attention to how we're saying what we're saying, like Ken said, how it's being received. I mean, there's a reason people say, I heard you say, and then you back it up again, and then you said, no, that's not what I said, or, you agree or disagree. But I think there's so many books being written and so many workshops and things like that where adults are learning better ways to communicate, which is just going to better the passing down of being able to communicate. So the youth will have a better way of communicating as they grow, instead of, like, I feel, again, as an adult, I didn't learn there were other ways to communicate as much. So just being better at it, and for everybody to have the same type of, not type, but like at least a style of communicating where you're asking a question after you're hearing somebody say something, instead of just moving on to your response or your reaction. But hopefully it's a response. But I think levels of communication are improving so much that if we could just keep expanding that and passing it down to the youth, that could only benefit everyone.
Excellent. And what I'm finding is that I'm falling down on the job here of selecting the person who's the speaker, because what you're saying is so enthralling. I'm working on it, trying to do things at the same time.
You always do it to me.
Yeah. You always have such great things to share. Shelly?
So Shelly Kohler, I'm a small business advocate, advisor, consultant, as well as coach. And inside of all that, as I really take a deep dive, communication is everything. How I say things, when I say things, and to whom I say them. And kind of touching upon what Lisa was saying, without have a preconceived notion of their response or really what they know and what they don't know. So, coming from a place of just having a lot of resources and information, being able to find out and ask questions, find out what's going on over there, and then being able to kind of, as the pay attention, right? That's like giving of my time to be attentive to hear what this person has to say. That's how I kind of interpret that whole pay attention kind of thing. But the words are kind of weird. But yeah, giving of my time so that I can listen and hear where this person is coming from, or what's going on. What do I need to learn from this? It's all kind of one, right? Everybody says I'm a good communicator, but how and to what extent? But there's so much more to dive into around the different levels of communication and how we, in a world that works, how are we going to light that candle of communication and the focus of that?
It's very, very interesting. So if we're thinking about this in terms of it being a personal phenomenon, we're going to have a certain level of effectiveness. As great as Quester's Way was, during its heyday, I think you were somewhere just shy of 500 people a month that would be coming through the door over there, Ken, in those kind of numbers?
A week. Yeah, depending on the week and what season it was and stuff like that. Yeah.
As compared to 350, who knows how many million Americans there are, mm-hmm. as opposed to 7.5 billion people on the planet. So while we're focusing on the sender, which is very, very important, we need to train human beings to be great listeners, to be listening for empowerment, not listening how to respond to what they're hearing as far as making changes. And Elisa, in the last segment, you said something. I'm an old man. I'm 66 years old, and I watched a lot of things happen. I've watched a lot of things stay the same. I've watched situations, and I put myself on the line being a volunteer as an activist in downtown revitalization, neighborhood revitalization zone, language and ordinance for the entire state, and then went around and trained people to write their ordinance for their communities. So what I'm saying to you is that in doing that, the candle we were lighting was for them to look at themselves and their neighborhoods in a completely different fashion. Actually not different, for them to invent, what fashion they would look at their communities. And we did this with no money. It was through the power of conversation. And so what I'm saying to you is that I started in groups of maybe 5 or 6 people and told them to invite their friends. And in Willimantic, our group grew to over 150 people that were participating in writing the ordinance, and we had groups and all that sort of thing. But what I came away with was that the politicians had a way of speaking to people that gave them something to be against. And what we were talking about gave them a reason to be for something. So they brought their boxing clubs, they brought their cooking groups, they brought their the things that they did in their churches, what they did in their not-for-profits, what they did in their communities in terms of taking a little eighth of an acre piece of land that was absolutely horrible, and people volunteering to put trees and flowers and benches and call it the Julia de Burgos Memorial Park. She was a poetess. I don't know if you've heard of her. But Julia was a very empowering person for people who speak Spanish. So what I'm asking is that if you want to short circuit all of the, like, I can never talk to 7.5 million people, let alone 7.5 billion. I'm really lucky that if I ever in my lifetime meet, 1 million friends, that would be really kind of cool, However, how do we teach people? And I think what you said, Shelly, when I was listening to you, asking questions and the critical thinking, but not asking necessarily the questions that they've been taught to ask. How about generating new questions depending on what the information and the topic is? So, for example, going back to, I gave you that history so I could stand here with some credibility to say, Lisa, I've watched the idea of inclusiveness and diversity be corrupted over a 30 or 40 year period. And what I mean by that is that originally, when I went to school, there were things that people of color could not do. They couldn't sit in the same restaurant as me in Georgia or South Carolina or Alabama. They literally couldn't be in the same restaurant. I saw James Brown play one time when I was in my teens. He had to come in through the back door, at that particular venue. So what I'm saying to you is that the idea behind we're all equal, as human beings, we're all equal in terms of our potential as human beings. However, we went through what I would say is almost 50 years of training people that you have to be careful about how you speak to people of color. You have to be careful. Like, for instance, if there's a word that upsets people, this is a relatively new thing, but we're going to make that go away. We're going to change the words because somebody doesn't like it, as opposed to asking them, what does it mean to you? What do you hear? And if you weren't offended by it, what would you hear? Are you interested in hearing what people have called masters for the last 4,000 or 5,000 years? The word master has a particular meaning, and it's not a word that needs to be messed with to make a person feel better today. Their lack of understanding of what the richness of what that word is, the blood, the sweat, and the tears, we have a thing called a master's degree. We have mastery in education. We have mastery in sports. So if we train kids at the beginning of their lives to listen for and call out certain behaviors in other people, and then you get enough people that are trained to do that, and I'm really on a soapbox here, so forgive me. I think this has to be said in order to step off to a new place where instead of just the 5 of us, if Vanessa is here, 6, if Tina is here, how do we get people to start to be responsible for what they hear and being able to find a way to transform what they hear into what they want? Does that make sense? And that doesn't necessarily require somebody, if you tell somebody that they're stupid, is no different than telling them you're not as good as all the other people that understand what this word means. So we're going to change the word for you so you don't have to go through that process. That what comes to mind is helping the butterfly out of the chrysalis, and the struggle that fills its wings and makes it into a flying butterfly is not something that somebody else can take away for it. It cramps them, and it also gives them something else to believe. So possibly, okay, just hang with me for a minute. I don't know everything, but I'm just saying to you, having observed what I've observed in how people have behaved, the inner cities that I've been in, Roxbury, in Boston, north end of Hartford, all over New England, with kids being shot every 95. I'm saying to you, Somebody wants it to stay the same, potentially. Don't know who that is, but we got to arm the people that live there with better tools to get out of the chrysalis. Thank you very much. I'm Bill Carell, and I approve this message. Shelly?
Yes. That is as well a soapbox for me, as you would know. It is on both sides, but how we hear things is as much kind of preformed as the answer we have in our head after hearing the same question asked over and over and over. So I think there's many components, right? So then we come in with, we need to disrupt that. So how do we do that? Ask a different question. We listen first to really what they're about, the environment that they're in, so that we know how to ask that question. Or we take them into a different environment. We disrupt it altogether, not take them, go to or provide or create a different environment.
Yeah.
And again, all this can be even nonverbal, right? So there are many different ways, but words were not created, or where I go to is all these mascot names that are being changed, and in sports groups, and Kansas City Chiefs and what. It's kind of like, okay, we're listening to the wrong things, right? Changing that is not going to change the environment around us. It's going to suffice one group of people, and I get their sensitivity around that, and that needs to have a conversation. But it just, up in one day they're this, and the next day you're not identified as such. I have a hard time kind of finding that common ground. I understand, but I also go to what you were saying, Bill, is, well, how are you hearing that? And why is it upset you? You're like, where's the basis and foundation of all that? And again, I think from the masses part, when you're in your public speaking or you're teaching and training someone, they always tell you to kind of teach to the highest listener. And the others will come up. They will pull themselves up to the top. Some don't, but that is entirely up to them. Or maybe it is up to the speaker to recognize that and then come around on the backside at some point. But that would be identifiable as, being able to touch those people and understand and really become part of their environment to hear what they have to say and why. So that really hits home for me.
Yeah, and I want to be really clear and condition your listening. I'm making no one bad and wrong with what I'm saying.
No.
And the typical thing that happens is that people are, as you said earlier, they are really subtly trained to hear things a particular way, and everything else goes by them. Mm-hmm. Simply because if we just started out by asking, when I'm around my grandchildren, whenever something comes out of their mouth, I'll ask them, where'd you hear that? What's that mean to you? How does that make you feel? I never ask, why did you say that? I'm not interested in getting a reason for any. You'll never hear me ask anybody who I love, why did you do that? Or when did you stop beating your dog? So the whole idea is to train people as human beings, not train people as things. Human beings are autonomous. They can make up their own mind about what's true and what's good and what's right, if you train them to do that. And I felt like I wasn't trained to do that. The evidence of it was I didn't graduate from college. As a matter of fact, I flunked out my first year. In order for me to become a peak performer, I had to go and get the information someplace else. I had to surround myself with mentors that were willing to go through my BS in my 20s asking them a lot of stupid questions and hearing what they had to say about the good ones would say, there's no right answer to that question.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So thank you, Shelly. And I do know that's in you, no doubt about it. So Lisa, since your name was brought up, would you like to have an opportunity to take a shot at that conversation?
This one is very deep. I have gone back and forth with all sorts of things up until probably recently, thinking, oh, political correctness, it's horrible. Why do we have to change things just to make some people happy? And I have been going through an evolution of sorts in my own mind, and obviously personal, but not, I'm not singular in this thing, because the thing that came to mind when you said you didn't finish college, but you approached all these mentors, but all I could think of was like, you had access to these mentors, which makes you, it makes a brilliant life for you, but not everybody has access to those. And things that block people from having access to anything, even if it's something as simple as language that invites diversity in, I think is important to look at, whether or not it's a simple change of words, or a change of wording, or a change of how are we preventing people from coming in to make our organization, our university, our town, our anything more inclusive of all people. And people, I think it's a question people like to ask now, at least it's coming up more now, that people are saying, you're right. I don't know, what do we do to make it more open to people? Is there something that is preventing people from approaching us even? So, I'm almost going to throw up thinking about this because I never saw it before from the point of view that, and never mind the privilege of everyone that I've had, and I've never understood it even myself till recently. And the fact, reading things like I'm reading a book from 1974 and heard, women couldn't even have a credit card in their name in 1974. So the word never comes up again. So if you can never belong to this, never do that, never, right now you can never have that, I think is an important aspect of inclusion, communication, how we want to make it a better world, basically. How to light the candle is for everybody kind of thing.
Yeah, and you know what? Is there anybody on this call or anybody who's ever going to see this that has not struggled with those conversations? If we start out loving people, like that's our first response to humanity, and then we get trained in that because you are who you are, it's not possible for you to love people in your current form. It's more of the thingification, so that being trained to have an automatic response, which is what Shelly said before, we don't believe that our thoughts were placed there by someone else. However, the evidence is to the contrary. The evidence is 100% of our first reaction to everything was trained into us, and we should be reacting that way. There's no good or bad to it. And as whoever it was that said, that people tend to, Ken, we was talking about people trying to quit smoking. They made a decision they're going to change something as opposed to create a new way of being. The changing something is quite different if you don't change the people you hang out with. Somebody else told me recently that 97% of all people, live within a few $1,000s annually, adjusted for time, to whatever their family had when they were growing up. Now, there's obviously some, that's conversationware. It's not the truth. I can't justify it to you. However, there's another one that says that most people grow up and live within X number of miles of where they were born, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that those people that have a disruptive experience in their life that allows them to really take a hard, deep look at, why am I here? Not why do you think I'm here? Why do I say I'm here? And if people are trained and taught to struggle with that question, and many of us have had life failures that made us look really hard at what was important to us, made us look really hard at what were our habits, made us look really hard at who are we spending our time with. Ken?
Well, it's kind of interesting. If you see a double yellow line in the middle of the road, we've all agreed that that's symbolic of driving on the right side. But if you go to England and you do that, you're going to get yourself killed because they all agreed that they're going to drive on the left side. And it's the numbers that matter. And all I can think of is, watching the Berlin Wall get torn down. That was symbolic of something. That was not about the wall. That was about unity. And it meant that some people had to give something up that they had grown comfortable with or believed in. And it was they were playing for a bigger game, So if you're looking at something like the Washington Redskins, that term, although it has history, if enough people feel that that's something you could rally around, that you can make a conscious change that's symbolic of our commitment to not referring to people by the color of their skin anymore and finding a better way to do it, is that such a bad thing? Even if it means you got to give up a little piece of yourself, because the greater good is more important. And, and I'm a firm believer in, we work on ourselves, we be our best selves in service to others, we set the example, we light the light for other people. But I don't know. I mean, as a community, we do rally around things. It gives us a common focal point. Tony Hsieh is the CEO of Zappos. It's a weird subset, but he wrote this book called Delivering Happiness. And he said when he really understood how to lead, a team of people and create an amazing culture in his company, he was at a rave, one of those big warehouse things. And he said he realized that all these people were doing their own thing in the way they're expressing themselves, but they were all facing the DJ. They were all looking at one thing. They had one focal point, and they all agreed that they could express themselves, but they were like banks to the river. So, so I think there needs to be recognition of that. And that's what we're seeing right now is sometimes there's a symbol or a word or a statue that we can all rally around. And it kind of sucks that it's become a sacrificial lamb in some, but then again, is it worth it? I'll give you one more example I just learned. Christopher Columbus, the reason that he became popularized was because Italian immigrants were being horribly treated. And I come from that family. So, and my grandfather, even in the 30s, it wasn't pretty for him. So they created kind of an iconic Italian hero that would allow Italians to be better accepted. And eventually they lobbied for that to become a national holiday. And the question now is, they're not discriminated against anymore. I don't know anyone in my family that's really, they've become part of the culture. So is that symbol, although it has value to them, in the greater scheme of things, has that symbol served its purpose? And do we need to look at now advocating for another group? I don't really know. I mean, that's the debate. But, so there's second and third order consequences, and it changes as we evolve as humans and as communities over time.
Yeah. Okay, guys. So this is ripping the Band-Aid off.
It is.
Right at the end of our half hour today. But I want to leave you with a thought. Okay. And Lisa, I'm throwing you a lifeline here. And anybody, me included, if you have a really strong reaction to a conversation or to something that's going on, unfortunately, the bad news is that there's a real opportunity for growth and transformation by hanging in there, okay? And getting it to the point where it can be expressed in words and language and with people that you trust and that would not be trying to get you to believe anything because you're too powerful to take somebody else's beliefs, but to give you some stewardship in terms of and support the way that I'm talking about doing with children. That how you listen to something and what upsets you is never what you think it is, okay? Which is where the conflict is. If our culture is actually gotten really, really, really good at finding out how to be divisive with human beings, any group of human beings, guess what? They'll sort themselves out. We don't have to go convince anybody that you're this or you're that. You just keep tossing out there what's bad about those kind of people. And when you say it about enough different things, everyone has an equal opportunity to be upset. I'm not a real fan of all of that, and I don't get to vote on it, okay? What is the name of that? There's a show that's about Facebook, Twitter, and Google, and a couple of others, which is called The Social Dilemma, I believe is the name. If you haven't watched that, you honestly got to give that a look-see, because it may open up something in terms of, are we all the product of what our habits are on a daily basis with all of this kind of stuff? You see what I'm saying? So how you start to get choice in a matter is when you start seeing that there are not this way or that way, but there are all these ways. That you then can start to see full rich colors, that it's not black and white, it's not gray, or whatever. And then you get to the point where you're kind of freed up and can hear people say things, and it's okay that whatever they're saying is absolutely disgusting, but it's not upsetting you. This is like a kid mouthing off. My grandson, the first time he used the F-bomb in the middle of the mall, that was kind of mortifying, 3 years old, and at the top of his lungs, said it like 5 or 6 times, and everybody in the mall is like staring over there. Who are you? And what's going on with that kid? So I'm going to ask that we draw a line here. I'm going to also ask that we spend a little bit of time between now and the next time we get together and see if we can condition our listening and see if you notice where people have a stake in us being left in a different kind of a space or a stage than when we saw the communication. It's about listening. It's not necessarily about our ability to broadcast, but it has everything to do with, are we living in a culture where we have no choice with what we're bombarded with every single day of our lives, everywhere we go? And based on what they think our preferences are, they're reinforcing those preferences by showing us things that agree with what they think we believe. Pretty interesting. All language. The way into it is language, the way out of it is language. And strongest sentence I can give you, Lisa, I love you. Completely and madly. Okay? Same for you, Shelly. And I don't know what to do about you, Ken, but
neither does anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that about you. So shall we say our goodbyes and thank people for listening in? Shelly?
Thank you for listening in and, being a part of transformation and a world that works. And it's going to take a lot of people to be the same and help light that candle. So thank you.
Awesome. Lisa?
Yes, thank you for this is a world of expression, so that's what words are for too, and communication and listening, and I agree and hear, but we'll take more into consideration and look more into, and I love what you said, Ken. But yes, I will take some time to think.
Yes. And may I make a request? Will you take some time to talk to some people that you trust? What's their view of the thing? Not what's right or wrong or what we should be doing as a social contract, but the feelings that they have about how how it's going and what doesn't seem to work about it or what does seem to work about it. Can you take it on as kind of like a conversation to have, as opposed to without other people's stewardship, is what I'm asking.
Such as?
Well, for instance, you've got a remarkable human being that you are with almost every single day. I'd be interested in what Samantha has to say. And then for one of you, to play the role of devil's advocate, which is pretty much what I do. I don't care what you think. I don't care what anybody believes. I would like them to be aware and awake if they're actually being hosed. Okay.
And that's, I've been living into that a lot lately, which is where this kind of comes from. And talking to like my sister, somebody that I really trust. And she said, I wish there were more voices like yours out there. That kind of thing. So I, do I not listen to her? I know this is going to sound.
I think you listen to everyone and you take away what works for you and leaves you in a healthy and whole space. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. That's all I want for you. You're great people and you do great work in the world, and I want to support that. Thank you. Ken?
So I'll leave it with, I actually had a thought for Lisa with the whole paying attention thing. So, because that just made me laugh. We teach kids to think of time as, and maybe this would work for intention. So investing in attention, which means that the thing you're giving your attention to compounds. It grows, like investing attention in a relationship that matters to you, whatever it is. And then you've got spending attention, where you may not get as much back from it, but it's worth giving it up for, so like playing video games for a kid. If you really enjoy it and you like it and you want to spend some of your time doing it, then go ahead, but just realize it's not going to compound like reading a book would, and then the last one is wasting your attention. The things that just suck it away like a black hole. What are you wasting your time on? So maybe we could use those 3 words for attention instead. So that's all I got.
Terrific. So the last parting thought for me is, I think everyone who finds themselves, you're going to have many opportunities over the next 2.5 weeks, I swear, to not feel really great about what's going on in the world or what's going on in front of you or what's going on with what people are saying. You don't have to take it on. You don't have to own it. But what you can do is look for the opportunity for, if this doesn't work, what would it look like if it were working? Stand in that question if you can, and let's see what comes of it. Thank you again. I love you all madly, and we'll go ahead and sign off now. And everyone have a terrific, terrific weekend.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can hear us at exvadio.com/podcasts, Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts.